So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in a series of webinars where we will be talking about planet scale solution, Microsoft Information Protection. And we have our two esteemed speakers with us, Mr. Vaibhav Upadhyay, who is the Principal Program Manager at Microsoft, and Mr. Manoj Gupta, who is the Principal Engineering Manager at Microsoft. And I would now request who of you would want to go first, Mr. Upadhyay and Mr. Gupta?
Sure, I'll go first. Hello,
So,
everyone, and it's a privilege to be here and talking to all of you. As Vikas said, my name is Vaibhav. I've been with Microsoft for about 13 years now. Joined them straight out of college, and at this point in time, I am kind of leading the Microsoft Information Protection Stack, which we will kind of talk about during our talk track today. Pleasure to be able to talk to all of you.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It's a pleasure to meet and greet everyone to you and take you to the journey of the MIP scenarios that we do work in Microsoft. I am Manoj Gupta, working as a Principal Engineering Manager and having more than 2 decades of experience and working with Microsoft for more than a decade. Primarily in last few years, we all are working around the Microsoft information protection stacks and doing a blended scale solution and scanning the data for the compliance and security purposes. We'll take you through to
So let me know if you folks can see my screen.
we can, Mr. Upadhyay.
You can, hang on, there's something wrong. Okay, let me. Something is wrong from my side. Just give me 1 sec, please. Yeah, the screen is visible.
yes, Vaibhav.
Perfect, thank you. And welcome everyone. So as Manoj and I was saying that today we'll take you through a planet scale solution, as we like to call it. And the name of the solution is Microsoft Information Protection. As a part of this conversation, we will see how Microsoft Information Protection sits in the overall Microsoft landscape. What is it that the solution does? Why is it so important in today's landscape? And subsequently, kind of look at some of the architectural considerations that Manoj and his team has to kind of go with for managing a solution like this. Just to give you a quick kind of overview of what Microsoft and what Microsoft's mission is, and as we know that every great organization needs an enduring mission, a noble goal, a challenge worth the effort that we put day in and day out. And not long after Satya became our CEO, we announced ours. And we kind of found it hiding in plain sight, if I may. And it connects back to our earliest days as a company, And what we want to do is we will empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And empower is a word that kind of gets thrown around quite a bit in our industry. And specifically when we talk about it, we mean with the right tools, anyone can do anything on the planet, right? And this is the most interesting piece because we are at a very unique moment in history, a moment that is both thrilling as well as uncertain. And we have seen unprecedented power and untapped potential across the strata of human society. And our mission is to bring people together and then help people achieve their true potential. Now, looking or mapping this mission to the word view, what are the solution areas? What is the culture here at Microsoft? So when we say that our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, in today's world, the word view, if you will see, is that everything is centered around intelligent cloud and intelligent edge. Computing is ubiquitous. There is ambient intelligence, if I may, and all the experiences are no longer centered around devices, but people. And as we consider the opportunities and the pressing challenges the world has today, we work to empower the 7 billion people on the planet. First, as the term ubiquitous computing, we have seen that computing is becoming embedded in the world in every place and everything. This is the era of the intelligent cloud and intelligent edge. Is kind of shaping up the next phase of innovation, driven by three massive technology trends that we have seen. First, again, it's computing is no longer confined to device or even to a data center. Instead, it is ubiquitous and distributed from the cloud to the edge, closer to where data is generated, and with the ability to adapt to a wide range of inputs, whether that is touch, speech, vision, or gesture. The second is AI, right? We've seen tremendous progress in recent years, achieving human parity with object recognition, in places like speech recognition, machine reading, and translation. But again, these breakthroughs, as we see, are no longer just theoretical. Instant ambient intelligence is infused into every experience that we see, mediating our interactions and distilling knowledge from everything around us. And then the third is the transition from putting the device at the center to putting people at the center of these experiences. And for years, we have built applications and experiences specifically for a given device. But the interaction model that now we have with computers and computing is no longer device first, really, right? It's human first, and it includes all the devices in our lives. Now, if you look at Microsoft, it is a humongous machine, right? There are multiple solution areas, ranging some in the consumer world to the enterprise world. Gaming, for instance, is very consumer-led. Search ads and news are very consumer-led or consumer-centric solution areas. Then you have, enterprise-centric solution areas as well, such as your modern life and modern work, your business applications, application and infrastructure as a service, data and AI, and last but not the least, which is security and compliance. And today, from a solution area perspective, this is where we are going to focus on. So Microsoft Information Protection as a solution in itself kind of sits within the security and compliance solution area of Microsoft. Now, when we talk about culture in Microsoft, so we saw our mission, we saw how the word view is shaping experiences and solutions, the different solution areas that Microsoft kind of works on. The culture within the organization itself, we put a lot of emphasis on growth mindset, where the emphasis is on learning and learning and relearning in our day-to-day work. The values that come with Microsoft, including the integrity aspect, managing expectations, where it is more of a coach, care, and mentor model, and the leadership principles that come with it. So you will see that culture in Microsoft, especially after, I would say, Satya took over, and he keeps saying that culture is not something that we should look at being top down, but it is the being of every person within this organization. Now, looking at what Satya says about security and compliance, right? What are his views? And he says that we must build trust directly into our technology. We must infuse technology with protections for privacy, transparency, and security. So every workload that we roll out, that becomes our own consumer. So look at MIP, solution as well as platform, right? So you will see information protection powering experiences like e-discovery, for instance, or communication compliance, for instance, insider risk management. And again, you don't need to know the terms, but these are the different kind of industry verticals which sit within the security and compliance space. And if you read about what analysts are saying, analysts like Forrester and Gartner, what they are saying about this space is that the days when you looked at security and compliance from an enterprise perspective, where it was a third-party vendor and you were stitching solutions across your devices, your digital estate, which may be in the cloud, on-prem, and on-prem is where everything sits in a physical data center managed by the enterprise itself rather than the cloud. And this, I think, this report was published somewhere in 2018. That the enterprise information protection is not going to be able to scale anymore just by the nature of how infrastructure was evolving as a service or platforms were evolving as a service. And what they said was that it is very important that experiences related to security and compliance are shipped as a part of the offering itself. So integrated information protection, if I may. So if you are rolling out a chat service like Slack or Teams, if you are rolling out a collaboration service like Documentum or SharePoint in our context, right? All of that, or even email workloads like G Suite, or in our case, Exchange Online, all of that needs to be thought through, and it should be infused within that particular solution itself. Now, let me just give you a word view of, and again, and if someone disagrees, I would love to know that. But in today's world, data is exploding. I mean, it is being created, stored, and shared everywhere. Starting from the private clouds of the world to platforms or in Azure or AWS. It is being generated in the form of documents, in the form of emails, in the form of records. Uh, Data gets generated in forms such as SMS, and it could be structured as well as unstructured data. And with the coming of this pandemic, remote work again is becoming the new normal for many companies around the world. And what organizations are seeing, that data is now being generated at an unprecedented rate. So, but how much data exactly are we talking about? And this is, just some of the top metrics that I wanted to highlight. We generate about 500,000. That's close to 500,000 tweets every minute. In 2020, coming off the pandemic, people spent about 1.25 billion years online. And that's alone in 2020. You know what that number was in 2018? Just 2.8 million years. So you can understand the magnitude of this increase, and the time that people are spending online generating data is actually just exponential. A small trivia on this: every person who is and this is kind of an average or a median, whatever you would want to say, will generate, or is already generating, I should say, we are in 2020, 2021, 1.7 MB of data a second. So you can imagine collectively how much data we will be generating just as a part of this meeting itself. And 90% of all of the data that has been created has been actually created in the past 2 years. Now, if I gave you a 1 Mbps line and asked you to download all the data that was available on the internet, do we know how much time it would take? Close to 200 million years to download all the data that is present on the internet. So this is just to kind of articulate the fact that the rate at which data is being generated, the places at which it is being generated, the formats that it is being generated in is currently highly exponential. Now, when you are generating data at this rate, what are the governments or the regulatory bodies doing? Data protection, as you see, is not only of business importance but of national importance today, right? And there are a number of regulations across the globe, which the customers, and when I say customers, I mean enterprises who are handling such kind of data, have to comply to. Collecting customer data is primarily, I mean, in most of the cases, it is a core part of any business. And there is a lack of rigor around maintaining and protecting personal data. And it's better, it's better than how it was a few years ago. But still, regulations are creating a need for the responsible usage of personal data, and not complying with these regulations like GDPR. It results in fines and withdrawals of licenses and lower credibility with regulators and customers. And these fines are substantial, to say the least. For example, I think GDPR goes to the tune of 20% of your annual gross revenue. And it doesn't even say that these are the number of records. If they are non-compliant, even if a single record is non-compliant, and if you're taken to the court, an enterprise can be fined to the tune of 20% of their entire annual revenue, which is a huge number, right? Now, moreover, governments want to show that they are doing something about this, so that for customers, they want to implement technology that they can trust. And on your slide, I mean, this is just a very bird's eye view of the different regulations that exist. You see the personal data protection bill that was introduced even in India. You see the Australian privacy principles. You see the general data privacy law, which cuts across organizations, cuts across geographies. So what you will see is some of these regulations come from industry, like, for example, HIPAA, or GLBA, as we like to call it, or SOX compliance. These are, HIPAA is primarily for our healthcare providers, people who deal with our healthcare data. GLBA and SOX compliance is more related to financial data. So some of these regulations are coming from the industry itself, and some of these regulations are actually coming from the governments of different geographies. And what we've seen is that by virtue of these regulations and by virtue of the magnitude of data that is being created, 88% of the organizations, they no longer have confidence to detect and prevent the loss of sensitive data. Okay, greater than 80% of the corporate data is actually dark, and it's not classified, protected, or governed. Like 80% of the data that gets generated in these enterprises, we don't even know what the data is, or they don't even know what the data is. And if you talk to the CISOs, and now this is not just an IT conversation anymore in these enterprises, right? This is a boardroom conversation now, because of the fines that you just saw, because of the loss of credibility that you just saw, because of the impact that it can generate for the businesses of these enterprises. This is no longer just an IT problem. It has actually become a boardroom problem, as I said. And protecting and governing sensitive data is the biggest concern in complying with these regulations. When we start talking to customers, and when we introduce Microsoft Information Protection or data loss prevention, we talk about, what's your strategy for protecting and governing sensitive and business critical data. These are some of the questions that we want our customers to ask themselves. Do you know where your business critical and sensitive data resides, and what is being done with it? I will tell you, I mean, it might be a little like, what do I mean by where? As I said, the digital estate today is not just confined to your endpoints or laptops, or just say your cloud repositories, or just say your Exchange servers. The places at which the data can be created and stored is pretty varied. And now add to that mix the different IaaS or PaaS providers or SaaS providers that exist. It kind of becomes a very, very heterogeneous environment, where all of these data repositories and the data generators are not just first party or one party systems. Now, if you know what your sensitive data is, where it is, how is it being stored, and what is being done with it, now do you have control of this data as it travels inside and outside your organization? Can you enforce policies? Can you define a sensitivity taxonomy? and say, hey, this is something that we can do with this data, and versus these are the allowed set of actions with the allowed set of exposure versus what isn't. And are you using multiple solutions to classify? As I said, if it is a solution that is being stitched by using different services, the biggest problem that exists is of consistency. So a particular system might say that, hey, this is a sensitive file, whereas depending upon the classification accuracy of your second system, that file may behave otherwise. And with that also comes the overhead of analyst maintenance. How do people go about managing these policies if they're in different places, and so forth, right? What is our approach? And our approach is very unique, where what we are saying is, hey, no matter where your data is created, modified, or shared, we will be able to classify that data, and we will be able to allow you to enforce protection actions. So if your data is on-prem, on file shares, or on endpoints, or on-prem databases, we have the ability to go, even if we are a cloud solution, we have the ability to go on-prem, go to these repositories, scan them for sensitivity, and then enforce protection action. If your data is on devices spanning from Windows to Mac to Android and so forth, we will be able to kind of tap into these devices and scan the data which is there for sensitivity. Now, if you're using your cloud and SaaS apps, ranging from Salesforce, which is a third-party cloud, to our own first-party cloud, Office 365, or G Suite, or AWS, or even the Dropboxes of the world, because in an enterprise, it's very difficult to control. It's something that we call as shadow IT. It's very difficult to control what your employees, where your employees are going to store their data. They will go to the Dropboxes of the world. They will go to the Salesforce of the world, and so forth. So if you map it, what we're saying is we will run from on-prem to the cloud. AIP scanner, and again, these are just terminologies of the solutions that we provide. So AIP scanner, or Azure Information Protection Scanner, is something that is very centric to on-prem. You have Office apps and endpoints in the devices space, and then in Office 365, or the Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is a CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, if I got that right. It's a particular set of technology. So what this kind of picture depicts is the complexity that, hey, if you want to be on-prem, there's a certain set of architecture and a certain set of design principles that you will have to follow. If you are on devices, or if you want to do this protection on devices, there's a separate set of architecture. And if you want to then kind of tap into the cloud, the technologies are entirely different. But all of this kind of comes together under the one umbrella of Microsoft Information Protection, and our customers get a unified pane of glass, where all of this is obfuscated. When they're creating a policy, it is just one policy which says, hey, if there is sensitive information, and they can define what sensitive means to them across the on-prem devices to the cloud SaaS apps, this is the protection action that I want you to do. So with that, what I'll do is I'll actually play a small video which kind of talks about all of this in action. Let me know if you can kind of hear the video sound.
Today, your data can often be one of your most critical assets. But how can we always know whether a piece of data is confidential and whether someone is emailing something against company policies, even by accident? You can keep your data safe with a feature in Exchange called Data Loss Prevention, or DLP. It is a unique policy management system designed to help keep your critical information in-house and out of the wrong hands. Users will be alerted to sensitive information alongside their everyday email experience through policy tips on Outlook Client or Outlook Web App. It gives admins the power to analyze, protect, and report on sensitive data traveling inside and outside of your organization. Keep your business safe by scanning from individual clients and the server. And all of this from the easy-to-use Exchange Admin Center. Not just a simple text scan, DLP does deep content analysis to ensure that no matter what you want to keep safe, from credit cards to account numbers, it is protected at the level you want. DLP goes further with document fingerprinting. For example, you could take a common document, such as a patent template, and create a unique fingerprint. Then, if a user sends a patent, Exchange would match it with the document fingerprint and deal with it based on a variety of customized options. From blocking outright, providing a policy tip, encrypting the email, or just notifying the admin or compliance officer in the back end. You can start taking advantage of DLP in one of three ways. First, you can easily select from one of the many policy templates that we provide and are always working to build upon. Second, you could select a template from the partner ecosystem. Companies all around the world are adding new and customized policy templates across a growing number of industries. Finally, you could create a policy from scratch or an update from an existing template, fine-tuning for your specific needs. DLP also helps you track success by offering built-in reporting. You can track policy usage during testing and also once you've enforced the policy to determine the impact and success. Even providing real-time updates through incident reports that can be sent at each individual occurrence. Data loss prevention is a big part of Microsoft's commitment to Office 365's security and compliance capabilities.
So this video kind of gave you an overview of all of the DLP related aspects that we were talking about in action, and I don't know why. Okay, so I think we are at 23 minutes. I do have 7 more minutes as per the schedule, so I'll just give you a brief into a little more abstracted view of what you just saw in the video, what actually is happening in the video. And when we were talking about the kind of questions that we want our customers to ask while implementing the strategy, the first thing that we ask our customers is the first step within your information protection journey is to know your data. What is that sensitive data? Where does it live? What is actually happening with it? And if you look at the nature of the data that gets created in different formats, it's not just one classification tech that can be used to classify all kinds of data. For example, in some places a very regex based approach may suit, where we are talking about, say, credit card numbers. Yes, it is a 16-digit number which passes some checksum. You can look for some keywords in the proximity. But then what you saw was, for example, a patent document. You might need to fingerprint it because the text that goes into a patent document might differ depending upon what kind of a patent it is. Similarly, there are ML models that we have built where customers can build their own custom models as well. Hey, if I want to look at merger and acquisition documents, or a very proprietary kind of content that is very specific to that enterprise. We also ship out of the box ML classifiers, say, for example, for detecting source code, for detecting resumes, depending upon the kind of data that the different regulations and enterprises are looking at. You might see at places the coming of there's this initiative that we've just started, which now is leveraging NLP, which is natural language processing, to kind of see what kind of communication compliance can we provide. There is OCR that we recently rolled out for communication compliance, which is optical character recognition, the data which is stored in the in image formats and so forth. Now, all of this is organized and mapped to the industry regulations. One other key takeaway with respect to the scale of it, I want you to understand, is all of this. Imagine an email, me drafting an email to you. All of this actually is happening on billions of documents, and I think Manoj is going to talk about that as well. Just imagine the scale of it with respect to the latency, with respect to the performance considerations that come with it, and the complexity. right? Now, once we have the availability of this classification tech, we provide to our customers a unified analytics dashboard where what they can do is they can understand what kind of classification sets do they have across their digital estate. So imagine if a company has about 100,000 100,000 employees. In all probability, they have 100,000 plus devices in the form of laptops, in the forms of cell phones, in the form of laptops, desktops. They have, in all probability, 100,000 plus cloud storage repositories in the shape of OneDrive for Business, or Dropbox and so forth. You can imagine the spread of the content across their digital estate. And what this unified analytics dashboard does, it gives our customers a view into what kind of sensitive files do they have. Does it contain US financial data? Does it contain personally identifiable information? Is it something which is related to the GDPR regulation and so forth? If they've come up with a labeling taxonomy, how many of these documents were meant for general consumption versus how many of them are, say, confidential or top secret? And what this does is, and across their workloads as well, how many of them are actually in Exchange or in SharePoint Online or in third-party repositories. The idea here is to provide a data inventory on day zero to our customers, so that they can go about and create the policies to adhere to the regulatory requirements. This is the Content Explorer, which kind of gives our admins a view of an in-place rendering of these sensitive documents. Of course, this admin needs to have a particular set of roles and permissions to be able to view the document in the embedded mode. And then comes the Activity Explorer. Now you understand, hey, what kind of data you have and where it is spread. The next logical thing to understand is what kind of activities are happening on your document. Are people upgrading or downgrading labels? How many of these are being, say, shared externally? How many have ever been copied to USB and so forth? So this is the Activity Explorer that kind of provides our enterprise customers with a view of what kind of activities are happening on their sensitive content, right? Now, if you know what kind of sensitive documents you have, and you know the kind of activities that are happening, that is when our enterprises or our customers can define their security posture. This is where they can define what kind of protections do they want to implement on these sensitive documents. So there are two mechanisms. One is you just classify the document and protect it, where the protection is implemented at the ingress and egress points. For example, I have classified that this document has 10 credit card numbers, and the protection action is going to be block print, or block USB copy, or block external sharing in SharePoint. That's one way of going about it. You can add one more layer on top of it, where you can say, hey, yes, if it has 10 credit card numbers, I want to label this as financial information, which by virtue of being financial information is highly confidential. And for highly confidential, this is the kind of encryption that goes with every highly confidential document. So what happens is, now you have the lock and key concept. Like I'll give you an analogy that if you have something which is valuable, it can be stored in a chest, in a box, and there are two ways that you can go about it. Either you can lock the box and say, hey, whoever has the key can only access it, or you can hide the box, or do both. What we do is we provide the capability to our customers to do both, where the discovery of the sensitive data can be prevented. And even if it is discovered, or if it leaves the perimeter, and when I say perimeter, I mean it leaves their organization boundaries. If some of their employees shares it externally or in public domain, the protection actually flows with the document itself. Now you can key off of very granular protection action on top of that label as well. Now, one of the biggest conundrums that enterprise customers have is that security almost always comes in the way of productivity. So how do you create a balance between productivity as well as securing your data? This is one of the key pillars or the key principles of the Microsoft Information Protection solution. Like, for example, one of the key capabilities that is it's best in suite is the co-authoring and collaboration of sensitive documents. So if you have, even if you have encryption on a document, it doesn't matter if you are two external people, two internal people, one external, one internal, and if you have the rights to the document, we enable co-authoring, which is like 2 or 3 people simultaneously collaborating on the document on encrypted and sensitive documents themselves. We show recommendations like in the form or shape or form of policy tips, right when you're authoring your document in Office, whether it be Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or Outlook. Right at the time of authoring, the IWs, as we call them, which is information workers, or you can think of them as the end users, they get these prompts with respect to the sensitivity of the document. So, as I said, this is one of the key principles of Microsoft Information Protection, to keep a balance between productivity as well as security. Who the guy who is actually configuring all of this for a particular enterprise, right? Imagine that they have to kind of manage this policy across their digital estate. For them, it comes into a very unified pane of glass. They just have one single, experience in our portal, which we call as Compliance Center. They can come to this portal. There's one single wizard where they can create these policies. They can receive the alerts, that kind of get generated as a part of these policies when they come into enforcement. So with that, I will hand it over to Manoj.
Thanks, Vaibhav. So thanks a lot for taking through to the MIP. Hello all, I'm sure I'm audible.
Yes, you are, Manoj. We can hear
Yeah,
you.
thanks a lot, Vaibhav, for taking us all towards the solution space and the Microsoft view and the culture and the mission. That is giving a good insights into the solution. Can you please go to the next slide? So let me go over with how much data that we are talking about when we are talking about the security and compliance. Just to give you the view that what is happening inside the SNC solution day in, day out, 70 plus million users are protected. I want to emphasize on the word is protected every day. 130 plus million activity signal, the activity signal that you are seeing in the Explorer are getting processed every day from different varied sources that we are collecting, processing, aggregating, and powering the scenario in that activity. And how much documents and email we are scanning for the sensitivity to ensure that none of the secure and private data are getting egressed and ingressed unintentionally. That is a 30 billion number of documents and email that we scan day in, day out. And if you give you a summary around the scale by which it is happening, if you see that number of honeybee population that this planet have in 2020 is close to 2 billion. And the second important population in this planet is the human, which is, as per 2021 records, is closing towards 7.9 billion. If you compare those numbers with the number of records that we are processing every day, it's about everyday data rather than a monthly or weekly or a yearly data. So you can see the scale by which the service is running with a different spectrum of the functionality to ensure that the organization is secure, not only on on-prem, it will be on devices as well as on different cloud within Microsoft ecosystem as well as on the outer periphery ecosystem that the organization is using in their ecosystem. So scale is one of the key pillar if you see from the perspective. So I thought about a lot as what should I cover in that architecture slide. I come up with two vertical main things that that we do care when we are building any of the service at that scale, and then two horizontal pillars that are extremely important into the space that any service or this security and compliance comes into the picture. Another next point, Vaibhav. So first one is I will touch upon the scalability. So in the era when we had started this organization, we all come from on-prem to the cloud, and one of the reason to come on the cloud is scalability. One of the way to ensure that the service that we are building in a simple scaling problem space, we have just enough resources for daily use and not for peak traffic. That is the simplified version of the scaling, but the consequences of not having enough compute or storage resources are dire. First come performance. Then the user starts getting error messages and getting logged out of the application. In a business setting, that equals to lost revenue. Conversely, the other alternative one can think of is to have a lots of resources to be put in place to have a highly scalable system, but the resources are not free. Over provisioning can lead to increased IT cost. So the three main strategies that are getting applied in the scale space. One is the scale up, which is like improving the hardware SKU in terms of compute, memory, or IO resources to an existing data center or the server, or keep upgrading over one genesis to the another genesis of the SKU and keep improving your service space. But that is coming from a couple of things. One is keep improving the data center, then decommissioning the data center which is having a lower SKUs. The another one that is very prominent, which is coming out, is a scale out, where we are adding up the additional servers to meet the service need. The scale out operation is equivalent, you can consider, of creating multiple copies of the service and add a load balancer to distribute the demand between them. In scale out, though it looked simple that we have to add simply a data center of various servers, in this talk, I'm not covering the logistics to add more and more data centers and servers to get a scale out related to routing, cap, and load balancer to achieve the scale out. The second most important aspect comes in the scaling is, are we doing scaling manually or a scheduled or automatic? Manual is pretty much evident from the name. Scheduled one is based on the traffic and requirement that are coming up. We can do a scale in and scale out both. However, it doesn't work out in unprecedented times and a surge in the application or the service usage. So what is the best one is the automatic, which keeps coming with the monitoring of the user traffic, different kind of load balancing and routing in place, and keep the service will auto scale based on the demand that it is sensing and anticipating in the near future as well. The scale also impacts the cost of the service running with data scale. Choosing the right scale based on the utilization in a given region, in a given functionality space is extremely important, and it really impacts the performance of the service as well as
Mr. Gupta, I'm sorry. There's a lot of echo at your end.
is it fine now?
No, it's still there. Do you have an external speaker or something that is on? We can't hear you now.
Is it fine now?
Yeah, it's perfect now. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, it is fine now. Can you hear us?
Okay. So the scalability comes with the performance aspects to it. Go to the next slide, Vaibhav. Thank you. The second most important pillar comes, which goes hand in hand with the scalability, is the resiliency and availability of the service that we are running. No system is free of failures. No matter how good process or the measures taken to the address the risk, we live in an uncertain world. Resiliency is the ability to handle failures gracefully and recover the whole system. This is huge challenge for services, an application where the components compete for resources and depend on other internal or external components of the service that may fail. Or there may be rely on defective softwares to serve the request from the user. There are three basic techniques that are used to increase the resiliency of a crowd system. The most important ones are checking and monitoring. An independent process continuously review that the system meets the minimum specification of behavior. This technique is key to detect failures and reconfiguration of the resources. Some of the examples of that is have monitors and heartbeat in place, which keeps checking the regular health of the system. And once that health is identified, the second most critical aspect that comes into play is to automatic remediation of the failure points. And the second critical stage is the replication. So consider a scenario where there is a natural disaster. It's not only one service or one system is getting to a failure, the entire region goes into a failure mode. Even in that natural disaster scenario, how do we ensure that the service remain uninterrupted and available to the consumer 24/7? That is getting covered by the replication across different locations, even to the different geos and with the different latencies. Even that is a hot replication which gets replicated every operation that is happening on a primary, as well as there are some delayed one to ensure that if the issue arises because of the recent transactions on even any replication service or the master or its slave, the delayed one will take over and provide the service back to the user. This also comes back with the complexity into the cafe routing and load balancing to ensure that the request will redirect it to the disaster recovery service or the server in a seamless and transparent way in real time without impacting the usage of the user, as well as to ensure that the transaction that is going on will remain intact. Now, the horizontal pillar, right? The core of any service is like it's available, it's scalable, it's running healthy. How do we ensure that the business is on a right track, the service is on a right track, and what are insights that we are gaining from our customers' usage and the service insights? The two important horizontals that I'm going to cover, one is insights and monitoring, which leads to data-driven development, and then security, privacy, and compliance, which brings the trust of the customers. So in the first pillar, a metrics is a key quantifier, consistent defined measurement of service performance. Examples of relevant metrics range from conversion rate, funnel to average usage of the service, and then the dropout and the traffic sources. Some of the examples are like time that a user is spending on a particular operation on your service. What is a bounce rate? What is the SLA and the page load time? Funnel study also goes into the insights, and performance also goes into the insights. The monitoring has to go into a consistent place to ensure that service is healthy, The features are discoverable, and see from the one of the important aspect of the service is from ensuring that customer satisfaction score, the CSAT score should be higher, and that comes primarily from covering four main stages of the funnel. One is whether the functionality of the feature that we are bringing in are discoverable enough so that the usage of that feature is up. Consideration from the user to use that feature in their use case scenario, it means not only the discoverability, the usage of the scenario and the feature is well understood by the customer well in advance, full in a full form way. And then conversion, that okay, the feature is discovered, feature is considered for the usage, how many users have started using that feature, and then the critical part comes is how many users are retained on that particular service or the functionality. It means that to what percentage the service, what it says in the consideration phase and discovery phase, is actually meeting the criteria of the user's expectation from that service. So these we can get from the metrics that we have to put. Everybody has to put those kind of metrics and KPIs to ensure that the service is working as expected. Next slide, Vaibhav. This is the fundamental pillar instead or horizontal pillar. And Vaibhav was covering the Satya's vision. Trust is at the core of the way business is driven within Microsoft, and the service are written within Microsoft. So service have to be secure, have to handle the privacy and the trust. The first thing to understand is that when determining whether statutes and regulations apply to you, the kind of organization you are matters less than the kind of data you are handling. Although most of the time they are overlapping between the two. The regulations that comes like health data and patient data in the US are subject to laws such as Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act (HIPAA) and the HITECH Act, as well as regulations such as the Clinical Laboratory Improvements Amendment (CLAP) also comes into the healthcare industry. Similarly, for GDPR, US Financial Data, PISMA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, they also comes into a play into a regulation. Privacy is again extremely important, be in terms of handling the customer data, even at a time of generating and creating the metrics and KPI that we're looking for. The privacy not only meeting the regulation, it should meet the internal privacy standard that we maintain at the Microsoft. The service must be secure. These days, the attack and all infiltration is happening a lot. And what brings the trust is the two key pillar things, which is security and privacy. Well, next slide, please. So just to cover, like whenever anybody is building a service, and especially when we build the service in Microsoft, the two horizontal pillars that we keep as a day one during the incubation of the service is metrics and KPI, and keeping the security, privacy, and compliance as a P0 item for the service that we are offering to our customers. And on our vertical pillars, scalability is a guarantee that in a even a go local scenarios, even on a containerization of the service in on premises, the scalability will ensure that the service will be available 24 cross 7 for any kind of peak load. Even during the pandemic, and was covering that the data was exponentially grown by 10x to multifold. The service remain available even for that kind of users and scan all the data that are coming to the ecosystem. That's end my talk, Vaibhav.
You're on mute, Weber.
You are muted, Vaibhav.
Sorry. So thank you, Manoj. And with that, I said that I'll stop presenting and look at the questions.
So we have 5 more minutes left, so we can definitely take some questions. If any of the attendees would like to like us to unmute them, please raise your hands. So we have a question from Mr. Vikram Nirmal. MIP is already built in with all the MS products like Window platform. I'm not sure if that's a question, but would you like to comment on that, Vaibhav or Manoj?
Yes, I'll probably take that. So this is still a journey in progress, to be honest. As I said, it depends upon where the data is, and your tech kind of differs. So if your data is on, say, your endpoints, which is your laptops, your Windows laptops, let me just say that, right? The mechanism and the performance and the resilience, as Manoj was talking about, depends upon the kind of tech that you are going to use. So there is, you can write it, and Manoj will know more about it than me. You can write it in the kernel or wherever. So where that is where the DLP aspect or the MIP aspect, we call it as agentless. So when it is in Windows, it's actually in the Defender on the Defender stack. So it's not actually an agent or an exe like some of our competes do, and by virtue of that, that resiliency is higher. Now, if you go and want to trap and scan the cloud data, for first party, we can sit in the hot path. I mean, we own Exchange Online, we own SharePoint, we own Teams, so we can sit in our own infrastructure. We can drop binaries there and scan that content. But now there are third-party clouds. There are Salesforces of the world, and then there are Dropboxes of the world. How do we get our, it's always eyes of scanning, but how do you even trap that data? There is a different set of technology that needs to be used, and it is called as a CASB, or a Cloud Access Security Broker. We do have a Cloud Access Security Broker by the name of MCAS, which is Microsoft Cloud App Security. So if you see the entire gamut, right, there are different chat service, and of course Exchange, we all know, right? So if you look at, most of the content gets authored on Office, on endpoints, stored in Office 365, or routed through EXO, which is Exchange, or in Teams, or in third-party clouds as well. So just to bring it all together, right? Yes, there are different pieces, a zillion moving pieces with respect to the tech and trigger points, but all of that kind of comes together under the umbrella of Microsoft Information Protection.
Okay. Hope that answers the question. So, is Microsoft building anything related to encryption? There's a follow-up question from Mr. Nirmal.
Yeah. So encryption, we already do. Encryption is one of the protection actions, actually. Manoj can talk a little bit more about it. We call it as OME, or Outlook Message Exception. And the labeling aspect of it, as I was calling, labeling is, again, label comes with encryption in place. So anything specific, I would love to know, but encryption is already on our stack. We have Azure RMS, I think we call it, Manoj.
Yes, Vaibhav.
Yeah.
So we have Azure RMS, as Vaibhav is saying, that labels are coming with the protection even within the Outlook. When you do apply the labels like highly confidential, or only to the employees, the encryption and other security aspects will take place during the stack.
Okay. So, Mr. Nirmal again has one more question, but before we take that, Mr. Sridhar wanted us to unmute his mic. Mr. Sridhar, if you still want to interact with our speakers, you can please raise your hand, and we can invite you to the stage. Sure.
Yeah, I think Manoj already responded to my chat on the chat box itself. But
Okay.
basically, you put all of the, when you aggregate all the services together, it's a great service. But also, from the risk side, becomes a single point of failure or potential SPOF sort of a thing. But I think he already, that's why I didn't raise my hand when you invited people earlier. So thanks, Manoj, for that thing.
All right.
Welcome,
Thank you,
Vibhav.
Mr. So I think we'll take one last question from Mr. Vikram Nirmal again and wind up the session. So in future, would Microsoft provide or replace all the regulation standards related to tech like ISO 27001, HIPAA, etc.?
No, we won't be replacing it. We don't have the empowerment to replace it. But yeah, we will be providing support for all of these regulations. It's an ever evolving list, if I may. I mean, GDPR just recently came out. It is one of the most stringent data regulations that at least I have seen or gone through. HIPAA we already support. SOX we are working on. So to answer his question, it is an ever-growing list, and it kind of comes from left, right, and center. So we prioritize depending upon the geographies they're coming from, depending upon the applicability of the industries for that particular regulatory compliance.
So you'll be evolving to meet the needs of the future standards as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I think with that, we have come to an end of today's session. I would like to thank Mr. Manoj Gupta and Mr. Vaibhav Upadhyay for being with us today and sharing their valuable insights. And thank you to our audience as well for joining us today for this webinar.
Thank you,
Thank
Vikas,
you,
and thank you, everyone. The pleasure was all ours. All the best, and have a great day forward.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to all.
Thank you.
Thank you.